I don't know if I could change. I don't think I would have chose the life of crime, you know. If I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't go through all this, you know. But life is life, you know, so you just roll with it.
Here's this man who's now in his early 50s, who spent the last 12 years of his life in prison for 2 dime bags of marijuana.
You know, life sentence for 2 bags of weed because I had a burglary when I was 17. I mean, I done went to jail for this charge. I done paid my parole for this charge. I done did my time, that's it.
If this law made Louisiana safe, then more power to it. But this has not proven to make Louisiana safe. We should expect more from our criminal justice system.
Growing up in Shreveport was tough on Fate Winslow.
We didn't have no parks back then. We didn't have no recreation, you know. When y'all get out of school, ain't nowhere to go, nothing to do. So before you know it, you going the wrong direction or going down the wrong road.
It led up to a run-in with an undercover police officer in 2008 that would change Winslow's life forever. According to Winslow's attorney, the officer approached Winslow asking for girls. Instead of getting him a sex worker, Winslow offered him drugs. At the time, Winslow was homeless and borrowed a friend's bike. Coming back 10 minutes later with 2 small bags of marijuana worth $20. He was arrested and with 3 prior felony convictions, a burglary of a business in 1985, a car burglary 10 years later, and possession of cocaine when he was 36. The $20 sale landed Winslow a life sentence at the age of 41.
You say, well, I'm gonna enhance your sentence for charges that already been used. I mean, I done went to jail for this charge. I done paid my parole for this charge. But then you're gonna come back and use that same one against me, enhance my sentence? You pay all that parole money, pay all the fees and everything, then they come back and use it again. You're paying for the same thing twice.
Under the revised statute, a person who commits more than 1 felony can have their sentencing enhanced if more felonies are committed. Because the law counts non-violent convictions as felonies, several people serve life sentences for non-violent offenses.
In less than 90 days, took me to trial, picked a jury, found me guilty. 10 whites found me guilty, 2 blacks did.
And you spent 12 years.
12 years. No money, no justice.
He's doing a life sentence for marijuana, and he had no violence in his past. I could not imagine how it is that we feel comfortable and feel okay with sentencing someone to die in Angola when they haven't done any violent acts in their past.
G. Park, Winslow's attorney and executive director of the Innocence Project New Orleans, says it took her team nearly 3 years to have Winslow's case brought back into court to prove he had an unfair trial. Park says the habitual offender law needs to be revised.
You know, I think probably the original intent was supposed to get to the dangerous people, right? But there are many, many crimes that are identified as felonies that are not violent. And so because it cast such a wide net, it ended up catching so many people who should never have been caught in that net.
Winslow was released from Angola in December 2020. His case is one of several in the state.
There's a real racial aspect to the sentences that we see and who gets the most severe sentences in Louisiana. And so when you look at the people who are sentenced to life in Louisiana and Angola, you will see that 90% of those men and women in prison are black men and women.
After you have time to sit down and just start, seeing things and understanding things, and you see, man, ain't no justice. If it hadn't been for Miss G, the Innocence Project out of New Orleans, I was gonna sit there until, eventually. That's what it's designed for.
Louisiana's habitual offender law has condemned thousands of Louisianians for minor offenses. So has this tough on crime rhetoric really helped the state of Louisiana, and who controls the sentencing?
If the state legislature passes laws regarding habitual offenders, we need to use that law to protect our citizens.
St. Landry Parish Sheriff Bobby Guidreau says the habitual offender law isn't being used enough. In his almost 50 years in law enforcement, habitual offenders are a recurring problem.
We do have issues with habitual offenders, and there's not a lot we can do about it other than go back and chase them again and lock them up.
Although Guidreau doesn't have the power to prosecute, he believes politics hinders them from protecting the parish.
Sometimes the parole board will see it different, the governor will see it different from local law enforcement, and I get it, I understand that. But we have right now the ability to put habitual offenders out of the communities that most complain.
When questioned about harsh sentencing for nonviolent drug offenders, Guidreau is willing to offer help.
Listen, people make mistakes in their life. First and second offenders, I don't have a problem with working with them, maybe getting them to some kind of counseling to work with them in their issues. But when you take a habitual offender that's been arrested for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times, it's past time. Something needs to be done.
In the November 2020 election, the parish elected its first Republican district attorney. Guidreau hopes this change in leadership will result in safer communities.
Lots of times, habitual offenders are back on the street before we can even meet with the judges or the district attorneys. We now will have the ability to meet with prosecutors and the judicial system to tell them what our issues are, and they're listening. I think it's very important that we all understand that this is a good law and we need to use it.
The law strengthened the existing multiple offender law into what some called the 3 strikes law. If someone got a third felony, they would be sentenced to life without parole. This included all crimes of violence, but also some non-violent crimes like certain drug convictions, theft, or fraud cases. KATC spoke with one of the original authors of the bill who says after 26 years, he still stands by his decision of drafting the bill, which would be passed into law.
I have no regrets with respect to that. It was and remains my feeling that habitual criminals do not belong out on the street because all they will do is commit additional crimes.
It is a relic of the past, and it definitely needs to be addressed and to be changed.
State Director for Right on Crime, Scott Payton, says because the law includes nonviolent offenses, more courts use this as a legal hook to mandate life sentencing.
What has happened in our criminal justice system is this tough on crime mentality has led to serving longer prison sentences, and the sentences are not proportionate with the crime.
Right now, almost 4,000 people are serving time under the habitual offender statute. About half of those are serving more than 20 years, with 519 of those serving life in prison. 1,900 are serving for nonviolent crimes, with each inmate costing taxpayers roughly $24,000 a year.
It's ultimately costing taxpayer dollars.
Vote Policy Coordinator Kelly Garrett works with families throughout the state to help inmates be exonerated or released from what she calls harsh sentencing. She says the scales of justice are imbalanced.
We have about 4,600 individuals who are doing life sentences here in the state of Louisiana. 74% of that are people of color. People of color make up about 30% of the population. Why is that happening? It's not that people of color are just more violent. That's not the case. But when you look at just the numbers itself, numbers don't lie.
Orleans, Jefferson, St. Tammany, and Washington parishes accounted for a combined 25% of all newly sentenced Louisiana prisoners last year. 92% of the 365 new inmates were sentenced under the repeat offender law. Under the law, after a conviction of a repeat offender, a district attorney can file to have the convict's punishment increased on account of his criminal history, sometimes exponentially. Some plea deals also incorporate habitual offender sentences.
If you're looking at a life sentence versus 25 years, you're gonna take a plea. 9 times out of 10, somebody's gonna take that plea.
In 2017, the law was amended, lifting the life in prison sentence for those convicted of nonviolent crimes for their second and third offense. Since then, the number of people in prison have dropped by 30%. In 2019, Governor Edwards signed legislation that would allow someone who has completed a nonviolent or non-sex conviction not to face enhancement of a sentence to a second nonviolent or non-sex offense. Unless the criminal activity continues, prosecutors cannot bring back that first offense in their calculation of habitual offender status.
That is a positive, but the problem still remains that our prosecutors wield a great deal of power in applying this statute. Hopefully we will see a change and use different programs instead of locking people up indefinitely with no return.
3 proposals to modify the habitual offender law will be presented in this upcoming legislative session. That session begins April 12th. For KATC Investigates, I'm Eman Boyd.